And we're live. I'm going to give it a few moments, as I always do. And take a sip of water, because I'm super dried out today. Allergies are pretty bad today. I don't know about you guys. Hi, everybody. Hello, hello. All right. Welcome, please, to another installment of Geek Speaks Greek. You'll notice I'm back in my customary position in front of the bookcase. There are the Lego Olympians back in their customary position atop the bookcase, away from evil cats. Geek Speaks Greek is a Monday, Wednesday, Friday show. I have listened every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I should say. I don't know how to say this better. I'm the geek. My name is George O'Connor. The speaking Greek part is that this is a series of talks, lectures, if you will, though that makes it sound like I'm punishing you almost, about different characters from Greek mythology, be they goddess, god, hero, or monster. We took a break from the normal format on the Monday's episode this week, where we did an in-depth exploration of the greatest gift I've ever received, the Lego Olympians, a custom-made set of Olympian minifigures that was gifted to me. It was awesome. If you want to go see it and you want to like, what's he talking about? Why is all this Lego talk? You can actually catch that episode up on my YouTube, youtube.com/user/George Olympians. I think it's also still available here on my Instagram, like on IGTV. Like, that's something I'm just figuring out now. Today, before we get into it, if you have never seen this before, you will know that one of the things that, no, you will not know if you've never seen this before. People who watch these videos are really amazingly talented, creative people, and they send me in all sorts of photos and artwork and bits of writing and such. If you have the inclination to do the same, please send it to me at my email, georgeoconnorbooks@gmail.com. And what I'm going to do to start off, before we get into the subject of today's lecture, I'm going to share some of the artwork I've received recently. First off, this is from Addie. It's Talia and Melpomene. What I love, you'll notice most of the time I hold up words, you can't read them. They are actually in reverse. She actually took the time to write the mirror reverse for Melpomene. So I'll read you what Talia is saying. Talia is saying, everything's great. And Melpomene is saying, the world is ending. Of course, Talia is the muse of comedy. Let's just do split screen. Everything's bright and sunny. She's dancing around. She's holding her happy mask. And you look at Melpomene's side, and it's like fire, and like the pillars are blackened, and there's the sad face, and her eyes are welling with tears. Great job, Addie. I almost said Maddie. Like, who's Maddie? Let's see what else we have here today. Oh, there's some really super cool ones here. So Yehi is a fan who is a super talented artist. She sends in lots of stuff. Today, I'm going to share quite a few things from her. First, she did this amazing picture of the Corybantes. The Corybantes came up very briefly, actually, in the episode I did last Friday about the Muses. And the Corybantes are normally, I forgot which muse is their mom. I feel like it's not Calliope. No, it's not Erato. I forgot who their mom is. Anyway, their mom is one of the muses, and their dad is Apollo. So it's not a Calliope. I don't know who it is. I should have looked this up. And they are famous for like doing this dance where they bang their shields. So here's a bunch of Corybantes dancing and banging their shields. And it says their helmets are definitely soundproof. Because I guess that would get to be a bit much. Then, I want to add this in. Just a beautiful portrait, there's no other way to describe it, of Dionysus himself. Oh, yes, Talia, of course, the muse of comedy. Thank you very much. Oh, wait. There's Yehi herself jumping in. Thank you so much. Look at this portrait. Look at the light on his shoulder. Look at the way his cup is glowing. Also, I love... This is something I draw on my Dionysus. My Dionysus always has a little bit tired eyes. He is a god of madness and wine. Both those things can put a real hurt on you. And I actually get it from, there's a famous painter you've probably heard of. If not, look him up, Caravaggio. And he did a series of paintings of Dionysus. He called them Bacchus in those, where Bacchus always has these kind of bags under his eyes. And my mental image of Dionysus is very much formed by those paintings. So great job there. And then, he also did just this kind of beautiful I guess this is also because there's a portrait of Zeus, just kind of Zeus floating midair. It looks like he's holding himself aloft by the electricity. And look how beautiful it is, the way it's lighting him up. And he's just kind of having this beatific moment where he's just kind of chilling midair. I'm like, wow, these are really beautiful, like just nice, kind of quiet moments for the Olympians. And that's just like a really cool thing to see. Up next, we have some art from, here's from Moira. Moira apparently her father missed the send-off for like last week, so she was quite miffed. Moira drew, here's a whole bunch of the Olympians. Like, it's like the entire roll call. And Dad points out, this is like the best part. Right here is Eris, the goddess of discord. She's lighting a torch off of Hestia's head. So it's like, that's really funny. I think, is that baby Hermes up here? Oh no, what I thought was a baby Hermes, I think is actually a passed out on the floor drunk Dionysus. Like, Dionysus, get yourself together. And then Moira also drew all 9 muses. Which, I mean, if you watch that episode, it was going to be on Friday, I was racing against the clock to get all 9 of them in. There's a lot of stuff to cover there. It's difficult. Let's see, what else we have? Inspired perhaps by Monday's episode where I showed off my Lego Olympians, Eleanor has started creating her own Olympians. This is a first pass draft. She was rating all her Harry Potter sets. Like, I could recognize, I think I know that one. That's that, like, I forgot her name. And she's made her first pass of them. She's going to be working them throughout the summer. There we have Demeter, there's Dionysus, there's Aphrodite and Ares. If we scroll up to the next group, oh wait, that might be Ares. Oh, that's Athena. And then there's Artemis, there's Hades. Look at the giant Hera and Zeus. And her mom wrote, they purposely made Hera bigger than the other ones because they know I'm a big fan of Hera and that I would approve. And I'm like, I do approve. Well done. Let's do a few more pictures here. There's more Lego to share. This seems like this has become a popular thing. And let me tell you, as a Lego geek and a Greek mythology geek, almost nothing makes me more happy than trying to see Greek gods, like, especially if it's based on my versions of Olympians of Lego. Like, oh my gosh. I think if I could have like one wish from a genie, it would probably be to see a Triceratops. But if I had a second wish from a genie, it would probably be to make an official set of Lego, like that is Olympians. Like, how cool would that be? Also, by the way, you probably noticed I'm sweating like a monster. It's very hot here in New York today. It's also very loud outside my house. So I'm going to be sweating this episode. Sorry, guys. So, who are these from? These are from Nora and Drake. And they sent a bunch of pictures. This is super clever, and I got to do this. Look at that. They got Fluffy from Harry Potter as Cerberus. I'm like, well, why don't I have a Fluffy? And I'm going to be going out later and getting a Fluffy. And, I'm not really sure who some of them are. I have to take a closer look at this. This one only got in a little while ago, so I haven't got a chance, but I'll post up some pics of that later. And let's see. Oh, this is, okay. So, yeah, he also sent in some other pieces. She I had made an offhand reference to Zeus as a movie director. And so she actually did this really great comic about what jobs the Olympians would have on a film set that's really creative. Like Artemis is like the scouting for sets person. I'm like, yeah, that totally makes sense. But like this one is called Athena. No. And it's Athena wearing her helmet, her customary helmet, and in the background is the helmet she wears when she first is born from Zeus's head. The helmet that we're told in the text that her mother, Metis, poured the last of her physical essence into making. And what Athena's thinking, I don't need her anymore. It's like, oh, poor Metis. And I think people are going to react to that. They'll be like, oh, no. Like, why would you do that? Because, it's very sad. She doesn't really have a mother because her mom was eaten by her dad. It's a story as old as time. And then these will be the last ones I showed today. This is from Megan, who has sent us many pictures before in the past. First picture she drew is a drawing on the takeoff of the idea. We had a discussion the other day where we kind of decided that probably Apollo can't draw very well. I don't remember exactly how it came up. And so here is a drawing contest. So you could draw the best Cyclopes. Cyclops. And there you see Athena's nailed it, and then like Apollo's doing what kind of looks like maybe he drew with his left foot or something. And everyone around's kind of like, ugh. And I feel like this is how myths start. Like, we made a little joke about this, and now it's becoming this thing. And in 2,000 years, when like, and some space people are talking about the ancient Greek myths, they're going to talk about how, and of course, Apollo couldn't draw very well. And it's all going to have started here. Here's a takeoff on, there's a scene in Hephaestus where Hephaestus, in revenge for his mistreatment by his parents and the rest of the gods, he creates a throne that traps his mother upside down in an unbreakable bond. And in this one, Zeus has fallen prey to it. He has forgotten that this is the chair, and they're all the other gods are kind of making fun of him. Someone's calling calling Athena an ungrateful brat. I mean, that's pretty rough, but maybe, I mean, I don't know. Maybe she doesn't realize that in that picture that that's her mom. And then, kind of setting the stage for today's, Megan drew a picture of Orpheus serenading Persephone and Hades in the underworld. And that's a perfect segue for me to start talking about today's... Can't turn this off. I was holding it upside down. Today's lecture is going to be about Orpheus. And... So this one's interesting because Orpheus has, thus far, only appeared, so far as I can tell, in one panel of Olympians. Maybe he's in the background somewhere else. And he probably has the record for being bumped from Olympians more than any other character. Because the one panel he appears in is in, there's like a one section of Hera, where we're retelling the organization of the Argonauts. And you see the Argonauts assembling for the first time. And there's this one little panel just mentioning Orpheus. And the only line I have about him is, Orpheus, whose music was so beautiful, it could even move stones. I'll talk about that later. Now, he was originally in the first draft of Hades. There was going to be a bit where it was actually going to help... the story of Hades, the book, is basically... It concerns itself mainly with the abduction of Persephone story. And I was going to have kind of like the abduction... not the abduction. The Orpheus and Eurydice story, which I'll get to in a little bit, kind of serve as like the moment of like learning of a lesson for Hades. It didn't really work out chronologically, and more importantly, it didn't work out space-wise. I really couldn't fit it in anywhere, right? So I'm like, okay, we're going to have to bump that one off. I also was going to tell then, because Orpheus is a really important character, also specifically, he's a character I really enjoy, I was going to tell his story in Apollo. And it was going to be one of the muses was going to tell his story. And again, I had so much to tell about Apollo himself and some of his other kids, Asclepius mainly, that I didn't really have time to do the Orpheus story in there. So it got bumped there again. And like, he's just, like, I even thought like maybe he made a cameo in Artemis, because there's a scene where the Argonauts are assembling. But then I remember, oh, it's not the Argonauts. It's actually Meleager assembling the hunt against the Caledonian bull. And most of the Argonauts are there, but not Orpheus, because his thing was playing music. So this dude, who I've made all these preparations for and made all these notes for, has only appeared in like one panel. So now we're rectifying this. Now, let's see. Let's give some background history. Orpheus is the son of the muse Calliope. This is kind of inspired by us doing the muses last week. I'm like, oh, I really got to do Orpheus, because like he's someone we should really talk about. Now, his father is somewhat disputed. The oldest sources that we could find, I don't know how to pronounce this name. His father is a guy named Oeagrus. It's Oeagros, who is a king of Thrace. And he is or Thraki, as the Greeks would say. And he's pretty much immortal, but like Money the Kings, like there's a little bit of God on his side. But basically, he's like, he's got a godmother. That's funny. And his dad is pretty much immortal. But there's another thread of people who say like that he is the son of Apollo. I like that one. It makes a lot of sense. Apollo's the god of music. This guy has an ability to play music it is superhuman. He can charm rocks. If you can make rocks dance, you're definitely doing something magical with your music. So and I get it, his mom is a goddess, so he could have got from her. But it's like being Apollo. I'm sorry. You know what? Apollo, we pick on Apollo on this podcast. I want Apollo to get some credit for this one. So let's just say Orpheus is his son. Okay? Now, This is interesting because multiple sources will state outright that Orpheus plays. So he plays the lyre, right? Which is like a instrument that Hermes invented, gave to his brother, his half brother Apollo. And we'll talk more about Hermes. Hermes is going to figure in a lot into the later part of this conversation. And so like he has this Orpheus has this magical ability with the lyre. He plays it so well. The multiple sources say he plays it even better than his dad. His dad being in this instance Apollo. I'm like, whoa. Now, we all know the story of Apollo and Marsyas, right? Marsyas was a satyr who made the mistake of saying he could play music better than Apollo. Of course he couldn't, so they had a music contest. Apollo won, and Apollo skinned him alive. But all these sources just outright saying that this guy could play music better than Apollo, I found was really interesting. What's even more interesting is that if you think of Apollo's son Asclepius, Asclepius was the god of healing. And Asclepius, so was Apollo. He was also a son of Apollo. And Asclepius is also said to be better at the arts of healing than his father, Apollo. So we have these two, they're demigods, but they're mortal. They both have deaths. So they have powers, but they're not immortal. They're not gods. Who both have abilities that surpass their father, who's one of the most major of the gods, in fields that he's actually one of the major gods of. And I thought that was just really kind of fascinating. Like, the idea, there's so much about, like, in Greek mythology of sons supplanting fathers or children supplanting fathers, right? And with Zeus, his whole thing is he's always trying to hold on to his power. And, Apollo would actually be a good candidate for being someone to replace Zeus, perhaps. But Zeus is, I would say, unequivocally regarded as a more powerful god than Apollo, who is, secured his place. He doesn't have anything really worry about Apollo. But Apollo is surpassed in music by Orpheus and surpassed in healing by Asclepius. It's just kind of interesting. Like, you always, as a parent, you always hope your kids will surpass you, so maybe Apollo's just a more generous father. I don't know. I'm getting a little bit off on a thing there. Orpheus is given this lyre. In the versions where Oeagrus is his dad, Apollo, because Apollo is friendly with the muses, is still kind of his music teacher. He gives him a lyre. But, like I said, Apollo's his dad. Let's just say Apollo's his dad. And Orpheus plays this thing, and he's able to use this lyre. He's able to, tame beasts with it, like wild creatures. He's able to make the rocks dance, which I mentioned a few times. There's this one account, which is really sort of interesting, where he goes to a land where there's cannibals, and by playing his music, he makes the cannibals want to eat fruit instead of humans. So it's well, that's a good move. It's all it took was a song. Who knew? All this time we've been eating people, and we could have just been chowing down on pineapples or peaches or something. They didn't know what pineapples were yet. So he's got these crazy abilities, okay? And these abilities are so noted that he ends up joining the Argonauts. We've talked about Jason and the Argonauts. There's an episode all devoted to Jason itself. You can see it on my YouTube, youtube.com/user/George Olympians. I think it's called John About Jason or something silly like that. And Orpheus is a member of this expedition. The Argo was this boat. It's kind of like the Avengers of the ancient world, where all these great heroes from ancient Greece are assembled, these great mythical heroes, onto this quest to find the Golden Fleece. The leader is Jason, right? And it makes sense. And then there's Orpheus is on it. Atalanta is on it. We did an episode about her. Heracles is on it. We did an episode about him. Some people claim Theseus is on it, but we did an episode about him. The Boreades, who are the sons of Boreas, the north wind. Calais and Zetus are on it. And Castor and Polydeuces, the son of Zeus. Well, I say it that's unique, that he doesn't have tons of sons. They're on this trip, and they make this trip together. And, they all have, powers and stuff. The Boreades have wings, and Heracles is, of course, super strong. Atalanta's very swift and can shoot arrows. And Orpheus's power is he plays music really good, which seems like it wouldn't be a cool power, but I'm you're not using your imagination that well. And in fact, his big role that he plays in the voyage of the Argonauts is they encounter the Sirens. The same sirens that Odysseus and his crew encounter in the Odyssey. Now, in the Odyssey, Odysseus is I want to hear the sirens' music because it's supposed to be so nice, it makes you go crazy. He takes all his men, makes them fill their ears with wax so they can't hear anything. And then they tie him to his mast of his ship. And he says, no matter what, no matter how much I scream or cry or whatever I do, just don't let me loose. And so they don't. They swipe. They go through. He hears the song and he's like, "Ah, die me! I want to go jump in the water." And like they don't let him, thankfully, because then the Odyssey would end abruptly, and then he died. So when the Argonaut years later is going to years before is going to the same area, the way they get past is Orpheus uses his power of music, which is so beautiful. He kind of just drowns out the sirens. Like, they could hear the sirens, but, like, what Orpheus is playing is so much nicer. Like, they're singing, like, jump in the water, jump in the water. He's like, keep rowing the boat, keep rowing the boat. And his rowing the boat song wins out, and he saves the day. So Orpheus is, like, this hero, right? Now, the real story of Orpheus, the one that everyone knows, like, I would say is one of the most popular of all Greek myths, is the story of Orpheus and Eurydice. Now, Eurydice... some sources say she's a nymph. Some sources are kind of vague on who she is. Let's just say Orpheus is this beautiful woman Eurydice is a beautiful woman. Did I say Orpheus? I don't know. Eurydice is a beautiful woman that Orpheus falls madly in love with, and they're married. And on their wedding day, she dies. Now, there's a couple different ways how she dies. She's pretty much always bitten by a poisonous snake. And actually, it's interesting, like, I should have mentioned this up front. Orpheus seems to be a little bit later addition than most of the myths. He's only 2,500 years old as opposed to older, like some of these stories. Because he doesn't get a mention in Homer. He doesn't get a mention in Hesiod. And in fact, the two best versions that I've encountered and the ones that I've made my notes from that I've used for all the books that he gets cut out of and when he eventually gets an appearance will be this. It's two Roman poets. It's Ovid and Virgil, right? And in Ovid, I think, because he tells it kind of briefly in Metamorphoses, but it's still got some really cool imagery that I use extensively elsewhere. In Ovid, she's just kind of walking along the shore on the day of her wedding day with a bunch of naiads who are in her bridal party, and she steps through some tall grass and she can't see what's there, and she steps on a poison snake, and the poison snake bites her and she dies. But then in Virgil's version, there's this dude named Aristeas. And Aristeas, he's a he's a beekeeper. He's also the son of Apollo. So I guess he's the half brother of Orpheus. And he's a creep. He's a monster. And he's kind of on her wedding day, he's hey, I love you. And he's chasing after Eurydice, and she runs away, and then she steps on the snake as she's fleeing this creep Aristeas. There's maybe some weird thing I couldn't quite understand, he blames Orpheus for killing his bees, but don't attack some guy's wife for that. So she dies. And Orpheus, of course, is heartbroken on his wedding day, too. It's just terrible. And he makes this decision. And sometimes he makes this decision in discussion with his dad, Apollo, because we've decided Apollo's definitely his dad. Sometimes he makes this decision in discussion with Hermes, his uncle. Sometimes he decides he's going to do it himself, and he's I'm going to go down to the underworld, and I'm going to get my wife back. Now, we talk about trips to the underworld a lot. It's actually kind of one of the things that makes for a big heroic journey, right? The hero's journey, one of the defining characteristics is they make a trip to the underworld. Heracles does it. Odysseus does it. You can see all sorts of modern day stories where there's if they don't actually make a trip to the underworld, they somehow defeat death in some way. It's kind of one of the recipes. So Orpheus makes this trip down to the underworld. And I mentioned how Ovid is... it's kind of a short account, but he has this really cool, in my book, Hades, the book opens up with a tour of the underworld, where you see Ixion bound in his flaming weald, and Titius bound over the earth, and the Danaids, they had to fill up this vat with a sieve, and so they can only drop one drop of water at a time, and Tantalus pushing his boulder. All that stuff I get from Ovid. He has this really amazing description where Orpheus is going down to underworld, and he's playing his music as he goes. So he encounters Cerberus, and Cerberus, who's actually Cerberus lets you in, so that's not a big deal. Cerberus yeah, you want to come in? Cool, just you're never getting out again. But he passes by Medusa, Shade, and all the shades in the underworld that we have seen in other stories. And when he gets to the Tartarus, where all these creative sinners are being punished, they all stop in this moment, and they stop and they turn and hear this beautiful music. Ixion's wheel stops turning, and Tantalus stops pushing up the hill. It's kind of cool. And then there's even this line, and then he plays this song of loss and pleading, and he appears before Hades and Persephone, and he makes his case. And they're the way I picture they're big and aloof and above him. They're trying to be stony-faced. But all around them, the underworld is coming to pieces. And all these shades who have no personality anymore are crying because the song is so beautiful. And there's this amazing line. We did, on Monday of last week, we did the Furies as an episode. And like the Erinyes, as the Greeks would call them, it says the Erinyes themselves cried. Like, and they're like the goddesses of vengeance. So like this, they're moved to tears by Orpheus pleading his case, like, please just let me take my wife Eurydice back. And so Hades and Persephone are like, okay, yeah, we don't normally do this, but you could take her back. You made the Furies cry. We're going to let you do this. So they let him take back the shade of his wife. And sometimes Hermes is there, especially in art, you see he's there. Somebody passes along the warning. They're like, here's the thing. You can't look back. And Orpheus is like, what do you mean? He's like, let's say it's Persephone. No, let's say it's Hades. It seems like the Hades thing. Hades is like, she'll be behind you. She won't make a noise. But you have to trust that she's walking behind you the entire way. And you could lead her out of here with your song. And when you get to the surface world, you'll be reunited. But if you ever look back before you're out of the cave, before you're done, she'll disappear forever and be lost to you for all time. And Orpheus is like, okay. So he heads out and he plays his music. And the same thing again, stuff, everyone's stopping. This time he comes to Cerberus, and Cerberus is like a happy puppy to see him, because like he tames Cerberus with his music. He walks right past the Guardian of the Dead. You gotta wonder if there's any other ghosts like, let's make a break for it. But and he travels up, and it's this huge path, and like there's all these descriptions. Man, I don't remember if it's an Ovid or Virgil now. One of them. They talk about how you hear all the other like the shades are saying things and just crying and stuff. But he starts having this doubt in his mind. Like, because Eurydice, who always delighted in his song, who is the light of his life, who would sing with him. I mean, she isn't saying anything. She's a shade. She does not get restored to her human form until she reaches the world above. So she's not saying anything. And in some versions of the story, the shades of other ghosts might be saying stuff like, oh, she's not really there. Like, anyway, these doubt is playing into Orpheus's mind. And as the story goes, he gets right up to the edge. He's just about to leave. And the feeling has gotten so intense that he's maybe being made a fool. He turns around and he sees Eurydice. And in that moment, she smiles sadly and disappears forever. The description in, I think it's Virgil, says she disappears like a whiff of black smoke. And Orpheus is destroyed. I just realized I talked a lot without drawing. So let me actually, now, this is interesting because I've only drawn Orpheus really that one time. This is almost going to be like one of those episodes where I actually kind of design the character as I talk. Because my version of Orpheus, at best, is a placeholder. But I wanted to share something kind of cool with you guys. When I was a kid, like in junior high and high school, like many people like me who love comics, I made up my own superhero characters. I had like a whole group of these superheroes, and they weren't superheroes as much, right? So the idea was I had some characters who were part of like an official superhero school, something kind of like the X-Men, but much more public. It was like literally a public school in New York City, right? And then there were other people who had powers, so like, we're not going to go to school to be this. We want to do what we want with our powers, with these cool gifts. And one of those guys was a guy named Kid Orpheus. And he was one of my characters. And he wasn't, I wouldn't say he was a bad guy, but he wasn't a good guy either. He was just somebody who was like, he had the power, like Orpheus, to play instruments beautifully. He could do anything. He could ensorcel you with his music. And he could pick up any instrument for the first time. You're like, oh, look, I have a xylophone. He'd pick it up and he'd be able to play it. And I'm like, here's a sousaphone. He could play that. Even without ever playing it, he had this ability to learn music. And he was like, it was like a superpower for him. And his whole thing was like, why do I want to go to school to learn how to be a superhero? I just want to go be like a cool rock star sort of guy. And he was like a character I really liked, Kid Orpheus. So I just wanted to share that because like I've always loved the Orpheus story, even though he's never gotten into my stories. So my Orpheus, the way I drew him, I actually kind of purposely went for a non-heroic depiction of him because I like the fact that Orpheus is a guy whose ability is he just makes beautiful music. He's with the Argonauts. He's with the most powerful demigod heroes of the age. But his power is he just play music really well. And honestly, it's like one of those things where like how probably Aphrodite could beat all the Olympians by making them fall in love with each other. Orpheus could probably defeat the entire team of the Argonauts because he could just make them all like so sad that they can't lift their heads up or all fall in love with each other or just not or whatever. So my Orpheus was kind of just an unimpressive looking guy physically. I wanted him to look very normal too. So he had brown eyes, brown hair, kind of a soft face. He was young at that point. I gave him like really black curly, I said brown hair, but like black curly hair. It's kind of an unfortunate dude, to be honest. And I kind of like that. Like, because, I mean, okay. I haven't finished my tale of Orpheus, but I think we can agree Orpheus is a little bit of a doofus, right? I mean, come on, man. You couldn't... I get it. You're worried about being made a fool of. If you were so worried, turn back in the beginning. Or do something to make sure. I don't know. Look in your lyre. See if you can see a reflection. Try to cheat if you really want to do it. Don't get right to the end. Don't quit 2 seconds before you get the finish line. So, yeah, just kind of a young guy with, like, hair that he probably should, not, like, get a better haircut. He has just kind of his tunic, very slight build, not interested in athletics. He has his lyre. It's a very nice lyre, as was given to him by Apollo. It's not the tortoiseshell one, because Apollo would never give that one up. That's the one Hermes gave me. I love that one. And you have to draw the 7 strings. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I mean, not too much going on there physically. Just kind of a simple design. And that's okay, because I like the normal guy aspect of Orpheus. And Orpheus, I mention him all the time. When I finish doing Asgardians and I come back to tell a series of stories about other Greek myths, Orpheus and Eurydice is top of that list. I've almost gotten it into like 2 or 3 books. I'm dying to tell my version of Orpheus and Eurydice. I've got notes of him like turning and seeing her disappearing, and just like the imagery is so beautiful. And it's just such a tragic story, and it gets worse from there. So she disappears at the entrance of the cave to at the underworld. He was so close to defeating death and getting back his bride on the day of their wedding. And I wish you could say he recovers. He doesn't. He actually gives up on women entirely. He takes some male lovers. There's actually a pretty strong strength of a lot of stories about him and Calais, one of the Boreades. Or at least he's in love with Calais, perhaps. Maybe Calais is like, no, you're not my type. But he never again takes another woman lover. He just kind of retreats and lives alone in this mountain. Now, the way he meets his end, this is pretty much universally agreed upon. But there's different reasons for it. In some versions, let me just say who does it. The Meneids of Dionysus. And here's where he almost once again got into the Dionysus book. I wanted to tell this story, but I decided I don't think we should jump into the end of Orpheus. And it takes us too far away from the main story of Dionysus to tell all this Orpheus and Eurydice stuff. So he got bumped from there again. But he's made his little spot. He lives in a cave. I guess it reminds him of like last time he saw his wife. And he's just the sad, mopey guy people know about. And one day Dionysus and his followers, the Meneids, Meneids are like women who are like crazed with the power of Dionysus. The madness has infected them, the drink. And there's 2 reasons they do this. One reason, they're like, hey, come be with us. We like you. You're really pretty. And he's like, I don't like girls anymore. I lost my wife. It hurts too much. I can't do that. The other version is maybe because his dad is Apollo, Orpheus proclaims, there's only one God. There's only one God I worship. It's Apollo. And the Meneids are like, we're here with Dionysus. He's a god. And he's like, that guy doesn't count. So whatever happens, the Meneids tear him apart, literally. He's torn piece from piece. They rip him to shreds. His head is thrown into a river along with his lyre. His head floats out to sea, is recovered on the island of Lesbos, and is there. They make a temple around it, and there's an oracle into historical times that was built around this, where people would tell you the fortune from from the head of Orpheus. Some people said it was the head itself that talked, which is important. I'll get into later. His lyre gets back to Olympus somehow, which is weird because Olympus isn't really near the water, but maybe his dad saw it and his father reclaims it. And that's the end of Orpheus. It's kind of a sad end. But like we know, heroes almost always have sad ends. There's very few of them who just get to go peacefully in their sleep on top of the world. Like, his whole story is marred by tragedy. Now, let me see. There was a few notes I wanted to make sure I hit here. Oh, okay. So I wanted to talk about some of the influences of Orpheus beyond just like his actual stories. At various points during this lecture series, you've probably heard me mention Orphic hymns or Orphic stories. There was a thread of Greek mythology belief, Greek religion belief, we'll say, that were the Orphic stories. And that is derived from Orpheus himself, because Orpheus was regarded very much as a historical figure. They figured it was a few generations back, but he was definitely a guy. And also there was that whole thing of his oracular head, or at least his temple, at Lesbos. And an entirely divergent and weird version of Greek religion was spawned from these Orphic, these Orpheus roots, where there's like this whole, I've mentioned this briefly, like, you know, the common version of the Greek myths is it all starts with Gaia, right? Gaia comes out of chaos. She begats Uranos. Uranos and her begat the Titans, blah, 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 right? In the Orphic theogony means birth of the gods, by the way, or theogony, depending how you pronounce it. The first one is not chaos. Before the chaos, there is this god called Phanes, or Phanes. And Phanes is born from this giant world egg. And Phanos did I say Thanos? Thanos. Phanes creates like chaos and like there's other steps in there. And then there's this weird thing where like, well, where did the world egg that Phanes came from? And like, oh, that came from a giant lion named Heracles. And you're like, wait, why is the lion named Heracles? Because Hera's not going to be born yet for 1,000 years. And at which point Orpheus's head is like, stop asking me questions. Because, like, the Orphic hymns are weird. But a lot of the mystery religions and the ideas of reincarnation and stuff, things that I actually talk about in the story of Hades, they come from Orphic sources. So it was this, like, it was this alternate version of Greek religion, which doesn't correspond closely to what we understand. And it's very contradictory in a lot of ways. So you don't often see it put into books. Spoilers, it got cut from Dionysus. Because there's a whole different Orphic origin for Dionysus, where he has a previous existence as a guy named Zagreus. And Zagreus is killed by the Titans, and then Zeus blows up the Titans, and it's just this whole thing. That was going to be in Dionysus, and it got cut for two reasons. One, I decided I really couldn't get into the Orpheus thing because it was just too much. And two, it's just crazy, and it just didn't fit. I think I'm going to do like a web comic that's going to be on my website for it because I want to get these stories out there. But for now, the Orphic things are not carried. But he plays this really major role in religion. The other thing I want to talk about is something I feel like I mention every day in here. Hadestown. Hadestown, well, not right now, it's not playing, but Hadestown is a current hit on Broadway. It's one of the best musicals I've ever seen. And it is the story of Orpheus and Eurydice. And it's been kind of updated, right? I don't want to get into too much talking about it, or I recommend anybody you can listen to this. I talked about it just the other day. Orpheus in this story, he's just this young kid, kind of a dweeb, which is keeping in touch with this. And he works under a guy named, well, I don't know why I'm making this vague. He works for Hermes. He calls him Mr. Hermes. It's really cute. Hermes is all like, I'm not doing this because I'm nice. I'm friends with his mom. And like he's referring to Calliope. And what's cool, I didn't really realize until I did research on the Muses the other day. In some versions of the story, Hermes and Calliope have been together. Linus, who I mentioned, or Linos, if you want to Greek it up, who was the music teacher that like Heracles killed as a baby, he is in some sources, he is a son of Hermes and Calliope. So like when he's like at several points in Hadestown, he like Hermes is like, I know his mom well. I'm like, I get it now. Oh my gosh. So he's kind of taken this Orpheus under his wing. And Hermes has two jobs in this story. He's a train conductor. The train takes you to the underworld. And he works in this kind of weird nightclub down below, which is like... So you the main characters in this story, Orpheus and Eurydice themselves, Hermes, Hades, and Persephone. And that's almost the entire cast. There's like the Muses. Oh, the Muses are down there on the underworld too. But if the Muses are in the underworld, we know the Erinyes. It's just kind of like just amazing musical, where they change some of the myths. In this version, Eurydice doesn't die from a snake bite, and they're not even married. Basically, Orpheus is this hopeless dreamer. He spends all his time making music, writing this song, so to speak. And he's able to play this little bit of the song, and it brings this rose to life, which, like, in this world, there hasn't been spring for years, because Persephone's so bummed about being underground all the time that she, like, kind of delays coming back more and more, and there's her and Hades' relationship is at a really strained point in this thing. And like Orpheus is writing the song to bring back spring. It turns out he's just doing an old song, and it's kind of silly. It's like, come on, Orpheus, you like... He ends up losing Eurydice because he spends all his time working on his music rather than paying attention to her. And in this version, instead of there being a snake that bites her, the snake is Hades himself, where Hades comes down and he's like, I hear you hungry, songbird, because he's got the best voice in the world, Patrick Page, look him up. And he kind of like recruits her for the underworld, takes her down and puts her to work building this giant wall protecting the underworld. And Orpheus makes his trip down, same thing, charms everybody, brings together, like kind of heals the relationship of of Hades and Persephone. It's the best part of the play. The best part of the play is Orpheus, I said Eurydice, didn't say. The best part of the play is Hades and Persephone. It's beautiful. There's a little moment they dance, you're just like, oh. And the same thing, he turns, you know, he has to take her back into the underworld. We know what's happening. It's heartbreaking when it happens. Eurydice is lost. But there's a bit in the beginning when Hermes is talking the intro where he talks about how this is a story that has happened many times before. And it's that idea of myth being cyclical, how like the myths just keep happening and happening. And like there's a lot of references to the fact like Hermes talks about how old he is. And the guy who plays Hermes is like 80, but he looks like he's like 40 because he's got better genes than everybody. And like Hades is an old man and Persephone's old. Like they're old gods. They've done this stance so many times. But for Orpheus, or like this latest incarnation of Orpheus, this is something new. And like every time it's like maybe it'll be different this time, but it never is. It's awesome. I love it. I love it. Everybody should listen to it. And now that I've talked you through a musical that you guys haven't seen, or if you have seen, you're like, yeah, nice, talking about a musical. That's really fun. How about we take some questions? I'm still stuck on the island of Lesbos. Isle of Lesbos, I don't know if you mean stuck on the idea of it. Lesbos is where we get the term lesbian from. It was, you know, there was a lot of womanly love there. Let's see. Does Apollo have anything to do with the death of Eurydice since she was killed by a snake? Do you think Apollo was jealous of Orpheus's skill? Now, that's super interesting, right? Because, like I was saying, for whatever reason, for such a well-known story, a lot of the early accounts of this don't really survive to us. Like, you look at the ancient Greek stuff, it's a lot of fractions of story, like little snippets, or like the earliest accounts we have of the story are artwork. Like, we don't actually see... It's one of the stories like the story of Arachne, where like the earliest versions of Arachne, we don't actually really get to hear a story until the Roman era because like the earlier Greek references, it's just art. No story survives. That's an interesting idea because you're right. The snake is definitely one of Apollo's symbols. And there is that, I'm going to circle back around. It's interesting that Apollo has two human sons, mostly human sons, who are both widely acknowledged at being better at the thing that he is the god of. I don't know. I literally have never seen any sort of hint in the text of that, but it's just possible that those texts haven't survived to us. And that's certainly not a very flattering depiction of Apollo, but it's possible. It's kind of a cool reading on it, right? Do I think this was a setup? Do you think Hades actually intended to ever relinquish Orpheus's bride? That is also a great question. To kind of to talk about the Hadestown connection, they do it really well, where Hades and Persephone are very moved by Orpheus and all he's done and his music, and the fact that he's played this song he wrote, which is actually their old song. So, like, yeah, good job. You've heard a song on the radio once and remembered it later. They're thankful, but Hades is kind of like, I can't make this exception. I'm the Lord of the dead. This is my job. And if I make this exception where I let him take his wife, then it's kind of setting a bad precedent. And then, people will be like, oh, wait, isn't she dead? Oh, my gosh. And it's going to be this whole thing. And it makes me look weak, like I've given up my power. So he has a line in the musical, which I think is probably pretty accurate to the way the real story went down, where he kind of knows. He's like, yeah, he's not going to be able to not look back. So I think it is a bit of a setup. I think Hades gave him, it was like a final test. Hades is like, we knew you had this ability to be this beautiful musician. And you've done something that nobody else has done before, except Dionysus, where you brought someone back from the dead, right? Or Asclepius, which killed him too. But he couldn't really let it happen. So he gave him a test that was so tantalus, that he couldn't resist it. And so he was doomed to fail. I've seen at least one old source too, which has it even more unfair, where Orpheus clears the cave, but because she's walking behind him, she's still in the cave entrance. So he actually waits till he gets up. He turns around, but he didn't walk far enough out. That version stinks. That doesn't make sense. How far are you supposed to know how are you supposed to know how far she's behind you? Should he have walked another 10 miles before he turns around? I don't know. That just stinks. But yeah, it was probably a bit of a setup. It wasn't. Am I going to make an Orpheus Lego minifigure? That would be awesome. Maybe I should. I gotta tell you, after doing my Lego episode the other day, I realized I need to do, and I even started working on her, I realized, and like there's even a spot for her there, and we forgot to put her up there. I need to do Hebe. I need to do the Chorites. And most importantly, and this is when I already started working on, like, looking online for the pieces, I need to do Eris. I need to have the goddess of discord on there. She's one of my favorites. How did I not remember her? It would be really cool if I could do a Metis, who's like a little bit see-through, perhaps. Maybe I could find like opaque pieces so she's like a ghostly form. Who else am I missing from there? That would really be oh, and then there's no Hecate. I don't have a Hecate up there yet. So I have a few people to do. So if I do Orpheus, he'll probably be a little bit lower down until I start really getting into the heroes. But a silly question, do I drink tea? Infrequently at best. I'm a big coffee head. As you guys know, I start most episodes drinking coffee. Occasionally, I will drink tea, especially when I have like a dry throat, but not very often. I've gone through stages where I drink it a little bit more. What would have happened if Orpheus got Eurydice back? That's from Greek Mythology Fanatic. That's a great question. I think he would have been very happy. I think she would have been really happy, and it wouldn't have felt like a Greek myth then, right? It would have been like, and they lived happily ever after. Like, wait, what? I mean, maybe he would have met the same end. Maybe like the Menaids would have come and like, hey, come be with us. And he's like, I'm with my wife. They're like, kill him. I don't know. Maybe, she'd already been back from the dead. Maybe that would have attracted the attention of Thanatos, the god of the dead, or Nyx or something. I mean, there's some cool stuff that could have happened. It might have... Something we've discovered over and over again during the course of this lecture series, reading my books, reading other books, there's very few happy endings for the mortal characters in Greek mythology. So if he had gotten her back, I'm sure something terrible had happened. What I should mention that's kind of weird is, you've all heard of Plato, right? Not like the stuff you sculpt, like the philosopher. Plato has very interesting ideas on the gods. Like, Plato definitely believes in the gods, but he also believes that the gods have no interactions with us. He feels like they exist, but they're in a different plane. They're different things. We know about them, but they never really involve with us. Like, it was like the first step, I think, towards not believing in the gods, right? But Plato, actually, he views this story as it's the wrong take on this thing. He's like, the reason this didn't work is Orpheus didn't really love her enough. Because if he loved her so much, he would have died to be with her. And that's like dark, right? Like, it's like he wouldn't have tried saving her. Like, bringing her back, he should have known bringing her back from the dead was an impossibility. So he should have joined her in the land of the dead. And that's why he failed. I'm like, Plato, that's bad. You're a bad person for thinking that, Plato. Let's see what else we got. This is similar to Marsyas. In your version, does Dionysus sort of collude with Apollo for Marsyas to lose? I think, okay, in my version of the story of Marsyas, like, Dionysus definitely seems to be kind of playing along with, like, he kind of knows what's going to happen. I don't think he's colluding. No, I guess you could say he's colluding. He's kind of like, ooh, what do you think? Do it, huh? He's egging on because he knows what's going to happen. Dionysus is, he's a mean drunk. He's like he's got some dangerous side. And he knows no satyr is going to beat his brother Apollo in a music contest. So he's kind of doing it for dark amusements. Maybe he's annoyed at Marsyas himself. There's this question someone told me to scroll up to see. Let me see if I can find it. Oof. It might be up there too far. If you could repeat your question, maybe. Because I'm just not seeing it. It's going back too far. Let me see if there's anything at the bottom. But isn't Orpheus immortal? Like, his head talks. Okay, yeah. Like I said, sometimes it's kind of messed up. Because, like, there are some accounts of this where his head lives on. In fact, I'm going to do a plug for one of my favorite comic series. If you ever read Sandman, the series by Neil Gaiman, it's like ties all these mythologies together. Orpheus and the talking head of Orpheus play an enormous role in that story. So he's kind of immortal. Although I believe it's recorded in history that oracle stops working. That it's believed that the oracle on Lesbos, by the time like the Greek history writers are writing about it, that is an oracle that has ceased to be. And I'd say, I wish I had a source for this. I know I've read this, where maybe it's Pausanias is visiting it or something, or Plutarch or somebody. They're like, Apollo came and he ended this. So does that mean he just takes his son's head and is like, got it in a box somewhere? Or does he give it like the sweet release of death finally? Because it's probably pretty rough just to be a head forever. So I guess he's kind of immortal. That is interesting. You know, he's not immortal enough he could grow a new body. Let's see. It's one of my questions. Can you cut and paste the question, CVQ Llama? Because I scrolled up and all I saw was something about the Infinity Gauntlet. Eleanor would like to request Iris for a future episode. Eleanor, that's a great idea. Dare I commit? I think I might actually do that for Friday. I had a different idea, but maybe I will do Iris because I've been having a hankering to draw her. That would be really fun. Didn't Orpheus try to kill himself a couple times, but never could because the inanimate objects don't want to hurt him because his music is too good? He tried Plato, an angry face. There are some versions where he does try to take his life, which is dark and, you know, not something that we should applaud in any way, of course. There are some versions where he does that. I wish I could remember who they are. They're kind of some just snippets, I think. But, so what should we do? Should we say Friday for Iris? Talk about the messenger of the goddesses, of the gods, the other messenger of the gods? One of those, yet another person who operates under the auspices of Hermes is kind of like, nobody gives me the attention. CVQ Lam, are you able to repost that question? Well, so we know Pan is you, and Cleo is inspired by a friend's child. Who else have you put into your books? I think I mentioned, well, she's not a real person, but Eris is definitely this character, Hopi, from Love and Rockets, which is my favorite comic series. Sometimes it's more often minor characters. One of the editors on Olympians is a woman named Callista Brill. You can look her. She's a really great book editor. And so in Hera, I very briefly draw like the story of Callisto, who is a nymph who's turned into a bear, and I drew her with the face of Callista, my editor. Also in Hera, there's King Aegeus of Elis, who the Aegean stables that Heracles has to clean out. One of my old studio mates was named Steve Ellis. Actually, Steve Ellis has a great learning how to draw series of live casts he's been doing. Look him up. His name is spelled E-L-L-I-S, but Elis is E-L-I-S. But I drew King Aegeus as my friend Steve. Like, he looks just like him. There's a lot of other people. A lot of people tell me various characters look like me, and I don't mean to look like me, but I see this face all the time, so sometimes my characters are looking like that. Aphrodite, of course, famously, is my version of Aphrodite, is Beyonce and Sofia Vergara from Modern Family combined in one person. Oh, but here we go. Would I do an alternate myth week or series like topics like on Medes, Titans, the birth of Apollo and Artemis, and more? Oh, you mean like just doing a series of stories just on a specific myth as opposed to an actual like god or goddess, like their whole bio? Absolutely, I'll be doing that. Especially as we move forward, I'm hitting more and more of some of the big gods. Like I've got most of them in the way. Know who we haven't done yet? Like that's crazy. I think like I'll do Iris on Friday. But like on Monday next week, I'm going to do some of the big shots we never got. Because we've never done Dionysus yet, which is because I'm working on his book. And like I don't want to it's kind of weird. I forget what I'm saying midway through it. But we really haven't done Zeus. One of the earliest Geek Speaks Greeks, I talk about him a little bit in relation to Kronos, his dad. But I haven't actually really done Zeus. So I have to do a Zeus episode. And some of the other big gods, like there's so much more I could do, but like say Artemis and things. I think I'm going to do like just kind of a big heavy hitters week next week. And then I'll come back and maybe start doing like individual myths where I go into great detail about specific stories that we didn't really get a chance to do. Let's see. What is so funny is drawing a character based on your design of Eris. Cool. Oh, I want to see that. You should put that. And then, isn't there a talking prophetic head in Norse mythology? That seems to be a recurring theme in myths. Yeah, there's... Oh, man. Okay, you have to forgive me. I don't remember if I'm mixing up real mythology or Marvel Comics Norse mythology. I think it's actually a severed eye, I think. I could be wrong. I think I'm doing Marvel Comics. I need to reread the Eddas because I don't want to like end up giving like bad information about like Norse mythology. Because you know Marvel Comics, I love them, but man, they got everything wrong in terms of Norse mythology. So I think. Wait, so he writes, what? No Zeus? I know. How have I not really done Zeus? Like, that's insane. And probably there's someone else I haven't done looking up there. And, like, you know, back in the early days of doing this, I combined stuff. Like, I did Ares and Aphrodite in the same episode. I did Artemis and Hestia in the same episode. Oh, you know who I was going to do on Friday originally? And I just decided I'm going to do Iris instead. I was going to do Asclepius. Maybe I'll do Asclepius next week. Add him in. Because he was, like, a guy I did, and then we lost that episode. So we're just about entering the countdown here. I have one more question I'll take. Who was your favorite character to draw whose design you were the most happy with? That's a good question. I think I really like... I'm going to draw her because I haven't drawn as much this one. I really have a fun time drawing Aphrodite. And it really comes down to the fact that she has like kind of the crazy hair. Like, it's just so fun to draw her hair. And there's just an attitude I could put in her positions. Like, her body language. Like, let's give her, like, she's got a little bit of sass. She has to be the most beautiful of all the goddesses just by virtue of who she is, right? But I just kind of like that attitude she brings. What should she be holding in her hand? Let's give her a mirror. She's really fun. I'll just doodle her a lot because you see the way I move my whole hand. Like, you just go crazy drawing her hair. It's so much fun. All right, we'll do one last question because this is interesting. Do the shades of the dead have brains? Can they think? Yes, they can seem to think. There is, in the Odyssey, when they go down to the underworld to talk to the shades of the dead, Odysseus has to open up his vein to give them blood, because the blood, they suck it like vampires. He puts it into like a pit in the ground, they lick it up, and that kind of brings them back their memories to a degree. It reminds them of being alive. Now, of course, we know once they cross over the river Styx, they kind of they wander through the fields of Asphodel for a while, and eventually they drink of the river Lethe. And Lethe was meant forgetfulness. It wipes their memories clean. They still have brains, but they're kind of like... I feel like they just kind of wander around in a daze, if that makes sense. And once you pass the Lethe, you're not the same person you were anymore. Like, everything that you were is gone at that point. So, like, you still have the hardware, so to speak, to think, but you don't have any of the software that's been put in there. Like, you don't have memory of your 6th birthday anymore because you're not that person anymore. So, okay... I think I have to wrap this up because I'm down under a minute before it cuts off automatically. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to yet another episode of Greek Speaks Geek. If you want to send me anything, be it a question or a letter or drawings, please send it to my email at georgeoconnorbooks@gmail.com. If you want to catch this episode again or any other episode you missed, check out my YouTube channel, youtube.com/user/George Olympians. And yeah, I'm signing off. And so Friday, join me here, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, where we're going to talk Iris, the messenger of the gods, personal messenger of Hera. And I'll see you all then. Bye-bye.